She walked out of a gym on a Wednesday evening wearing an olive green hoodie. 6 days later, searchers found her body in the woods less than 2 miles away, wearing that exact same hoodie. No bullet wounds, no stab wounds, no signs of a struggle visible to the officers who found her. And in the 11 days before she disappeared, something happened to Elena Moore that her closest friend of 10 years still cannot explain. A woman described as always smiling, always present, always showing up for the people in her life, was captured on a stranger's doorbell camera, confused, disoriented, trying to walk into a house that was not hers, saying the words, "I don't know what I'm doing." A week before that, she sat across from her best friend at brunch and said something she had never said before in 10 years of friendship. "I am scared for my life." Tonight, we are going to walk through every confirmed detail of what happened to Elena Catherine Moore, the timeline, the search, the evidence, and the questions a forensic laboratory in Charleston is now working to resolve. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why a coroner is asking the public for patience, why an entire community organized search parties and posted rewards, and why national media outlets from coast to coast have not been able to look away from this case. What actually killed Elena Moore? Drop a comment right now and tell me where in the world you are watching this from and what time is it over there as you are watching. I read every single one. Hit that like button, share this with someone following this case, and subscribe to Dark Pulse with the notification bell turned all the way on. Now let us get into it. Elena Catherine Moore was 39 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, approximately 120 pounds, brown hair, brown eyes, a personal trainer at Wolf's Fitness Center in Lexington, South Carolina, and a regular presence at the Planet Fitness on Whiteford Way. She also worked at a CVS and tended bar at multiple establishments around town. 3 jobs, all of them requiring her to show up, engage with strangers, and be present in a way that left little room for hiding. By every account from the people who knew her, she was active, social, professionally engaged, present in her community in the way only someone who genuinely connects with people can be. Lexington Police Inspector Missy Silcox described her disappearance as very out of character. Her friends say the same thing, repeatedly, in almost identical language. She was always smiling, always showing up, always there. That context matters enormously, because the behavioral changes investigators have now documented in Elena's final weeks were so extreme and so sudden that the contrast between who she had always been and what she became in those last days is the single most disturbing element of this entire case. On May the 31st, 11 days before she vanished, Elena attended a brunch with her close friend Sandra Rochelle Campbell. Campbell had known Elena for over 10 years. They told each other everything. And according to Campbell, something felt different that day in a way she had never experienced with her friend before. Elena kept getting up from the table to look out the window, as though she were watching for someone, or afraid of being watched. And at some point during that brunch, Elena told Campbell she was scared for her life. Those were her exact words. When Campbell pressed for details, Elena said she could not talk about it right then. There were too many people around. They needed to speak one-on-one. They played phone tag in the days that followed. Campbell never got that conversation. Now she never will. 4 days later, approximately June the 4th, a Ring doorbell camera at a home roughly half a mile from the Planet Fitness where Elena regularly worked out captured footage that would become, when it surfaced publicly on June the 16th, the single most analyzed piece of evidence in this entire case. A DoorDash delivery driver drops food at the front door of homeowners Sarah Burleson and John Moore, no relation to Elena. Moments later, Elena Moore appears on camera, walks up to the door, and picks up the food order as though it belongs to her. When John Moore opens his door, Elena hands him the food. Then she attempts to follow him inside the house. According to reporting from journalist Ashley Banfield, who later dedicated a full episode of her podcast Drop Dead Serious to analyzing this footage frame by frame, Elena can be heard saying, "I don't know what I'm doing." John Moore later told News Nation that once he took the food and turned to walk back inside, Elena started walking into the house with him. He said she seemed genuinely confused and disoriented about where she was. This footage was recorded approximately 1 week before Elena disappeared. A woman described by everyone who knew her as sharp, professional, and socially engaged was behaving as though she had lost her basic ability to understand where she was standing. What causes a healthy, active, 39-year-old fitness professional to suddenly display this level of cognitive disruption? Two main explanations have circulated. Some online communities have pointed to possible toxic exposure, arguing that the suddenness and severity of the change does not match a typical psychiatric onset. Medical professionals who reportedly treated her in person during this period approached it instead as a mental health crisis. Authorities have publicly stated the disorientation is officially being examined from that angle, not a toxicological one. Both explanations remain unconfirmed. The pending toxicology results are what will ultimately decide between them, or reveal a third possibility neither side of this debate has been able to confirm or rule out. What is not in dispute from any side of this conversation is the timeline itself. If her social media silence began in late April or early May, that marks the earliest visible shift. By May the 31st, she was telling her best friend she was scared for her life. By approximately June the 4th, she was on camera at a stranger's house.
10 years now. We're really close, like tell each other everything. She's been that person for me for a long time, actually. I think we're just all just trying to, my friend would not be alone walking at nighttime. My last interaction with Elena.
Unable to explain why she was there. Sources have indicated she was in a mental health treatment facility at some point during this same period, suggesting her symptoms were severe enough to require institutional care. And by June the 11th, she walked out of a gym into the woods without a functioning phone and was found dead 6 days later. That is a 6-week arc, regardless of its ultimate cause, and it is the reason this case has not faded from public attention the way most missing person stories eventually do. If you are still watching at this point, drop a comment with, "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. After the doorbell footage, surveillance captured Elena one more time. At 9:17 in the evening on June the 11th, roughly 2.5 hours after she had signed into the gym, cameras at a nearby Publix parking lot picked her up walking through the lot in the direction of Old Cherokee Road. Same olive green hoodie, same black athletic pants. No car, no phone signal. But here is the detail that has generated significant discussion among people who have studied this footage closely. Elena was not stumbling. She was not wandering aimlessly the way she had appeared on the doorbell camera a week earlier. She was walking with what investigators and private investigator Henry Dukes both described as clear direction, as though she had somewhere specific in mind. It is the last confirmed image anyone has of Elena Moore alive. After that footage, the cameras ran out, and the 2.5-hour window between her 6:40 gym sign-in and that 9:17 sighting remains publicly unaccounted for. Where she went, and what happened to her during that gap, has never been answered on the public record. There is one more detail worth noting here. The initial missing person report filed by Lexington Police actually listed Elena's last known location as the CVS, where she also worked part-time, not Planet Fitness. It was only in a subsequent correction that police clarified she had last been seen leaving the gym. Whether that discrepancy reflects a genuine stop at the CVS sometime that day, or simply an early administrative error in a fast-moving case, has never been clarified publicly. Sandra Campbell has been firm in pushing back against the idea that a pre-existing mental health condition fully explains what happened to her friend. She told News Nation that she and Elena were always open with each other about mental health, that Elena had mentioned struggling with anxiety in the past, but that the characterization of a full breakdown simply did not match the woman she knew. Campbell said Elena loved her life, looked forward to her days, and still showed up for her training clients even when things were difficult. Then Campbell drew a distinction worth sitting with. She said none of this made sense to her, until the final week before Elena disappeared, until the doorbell footage, until the behavior that everyone who knew Elena agrees was simply not her. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, who has reviewed the publicly available details of this case for News Nation, added an important caveat to this entire conversation. She noted that a person can be telling the complete truth when she says she is scared for her life, and can also be genuinely experiencing a psychiatric crisis that has nothing to do with anyone else's actions. The two things are not mutually exclusive. Both can be real at exactly the same time. That nuance matters, because it is the reason this case cannot be neatly sorted into a single explanation before the laboratory results come back. Elena's husband, Brandon Slice, reported her missing after discovering her vehicle in the Lowe's parking lot near the Planet Fitness. He has a background in law enforcement, having previously worked for the Lexington County Sheriff's Department for 14 years and now operates as a licensed private investigator. Lexington Police Inspector Missy Silcox has confirmed directly to Newsweek that Slice is not currently a person of interest in this investigation. Private investigator Henry Dukes, who worked the case directly and had ongoing contact with Slice throughout the search, told NewsNation he found absolutely no red flags in his interactions with him, describing him as very distraught, very emotional, and fully committed to doing everything he could to help find his wife. Dukes Investigations and Consulting, the private firm assisting in the search, publicly posted that Elena had been missing for 6 days and asked Lexington residents to check their own personal security cameras for any possible footage of her. The firm also offered a $1,500 reward for information leading to her whereabouts. Dukes told NewsNation that if Elena was out walking around the city during those days, someone had to have seen her, and what investigators needed most was for people to simply pick up the phone. Some online speculation has attempted to connect Slice's professional investigative background to the case in ways law enforcement has explicitly not supported. Those theories are unfounded and are not backed by any evidence that has been released by the people actually running this investigation. They are noted here only because they exist in the broader public conversation surrounding this case. The search effort itself tells its own story about how seriously this case was treated from the very beginning, even before anyone knew it would end the way it did. On Friday, June the 13th, police deployed drones over the wooded area behind Planet Fitness. The results were negative. Inspector Silcox told ABC News at the time that officers wanted to be certain they had not missed anything before ruling that location out entirely. On Monday, June the 16th, a much larger multi-agency search was conducted in the wooded areas behind the nearby Lowe's and Planet Fitness, involving the Lexington County Sheriff's Department, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, the Department of Natural Resources, and other emergency response agencies. Chief Terrence Green described it at the time as a methodical attempt to eliminate a possible location, not a recovery operation. After hours of searching, the result was the same as before. No trace of Elena Moore was found. That same evening, the Lexington Police Department made a misstep that further strained public confidence at an already difficult moment. The department issued a statement saying Elena had been located, only to retract it minutes later, calling it a false report and issuing an apology for the confusion it caused. In a community already on edge after days of fruitless searching, that retraction generated real frustration. Some residents publicly questioned whether the department was moving quickly enough and why the public's surveillance footage, which would ultimately prove critical, was not released until 6 full days after Elena was last seen. It was a tip called in that same evening from a resident who told police they had seen Elena entering the wooded area near Lakeside Middle School on the night she disappeared, that finally pointed searchers in the right direction. Chief Green directly and publicly credited ongoing media coverage of the case for generating that specific tip, thanking reporters by name at his press conference. When Elena's body was found on Wednesday, June the 17th, the search that located her had begun only that afternoon, at approximately 1:30, based on that resident's tip from the night before. By 2:48, searchers had found a body matching her description. Coroner Margaret Fisher issued a statement that evening confirming the body was female and matched Elena's clothing. The same olive green hoodie and black athletic pants documented on every camera since June the 11th. But she cautioned that no positive identification had yet been made and no cause of death determined. She asked the public for patience, emphasizing that proper identification and a cause of death determination simply take time to do correctly. The discovery brought South Carolina Law Enforcement Division investigators into the surrounding Berkshire community almost immediately. Resident Joe Tunzing told reporters that SLED investigators came to his door that same Wednesday afternoon, showing him a photograph of Elena and asking whether he had seen her. He had not, but the speed and thoroughness of that door-to-door canvassing confirmed that authorities were treating this case with the full gravity of a major investigation from its very first hours. 2 days later, on Friday, June the 19th, Coroner Fisher formally confirmed what the community had been bracing for. The body was Elena Catherine Moore. She was 39 years old. SLED's involvement in this case began the day the body was found, not weeks afterward and not in response to public pressure. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division functions as the state's primary investigative agency for major crimes, with forensic laboratories and digital forensics capabilities that no individual municipal department in South Carolina can match. Their immediate deployment is itself a signal. If this were a straightforward case in either direction, an obvious accident or an obvious crime, the response likely would have looked different. What SLED investigators are now working with includes the complete body of surveillance footage from June the 11th, the doorbell camera video from June the 4th, Elena's phone records, any available digital evidence from her devices, medical records from treatment facilities, statements from multiple friends who have spoken publicly, statements from Brandon Slice, and the physical evidence recovered from the scene itself. There may be additional surveillance footage collected from other businesses along her route that has simply not been made public, since SLED investigations operate with a significantly tighter information perimeter than typical local police cases. The coroner's office has directed anyone with relevant information to contact SLED directly at 803-737-9000 or by email at tips@sled-sc.gov. In a city of roughly 23,000 people, where the gym, the Publix, the Lowe's, and the wooded area along Old Cherokee Road all sit within a remarkably compact geographic footprint, investigators clearly believe someone may have seen something they have not yet come forward with. The forensic process now underway at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston is comprehensive by design. A full autopsy involves both external and internal examination. External for any visible injuries or anomalies, internal for the condition of organs and any evidence of disease, injury, or ingestion. The toxicology panel is the result everyone following this case is actually waiting for. A standard panel screens for common substances and can return results within days. An extended or comprehensive panel, testing for less common compounds, heavy metals, and substances that require more specialized laboratory analysis, can take weeks or even months. Coroner Fisher's own caution that results could take several days to several weeks strongly suggests a comprehensive panel was ordered rather than a limited one. Given everything documented about Elena's final 6 weeks, that is precisely the scientific approach this case demands. The distinction between cause of death and manner of death matters here as well. Cause of death is the specific medical finding, what physically ended Elena's life. Manner of death is the legal classification that follows: natural, accident, suicide, homicide, or undetermined. A homicide ruling would not mean anyone has been charged. It would mean investigators concluded another person's actions contributed to her death, which changes the entire framework of what happens next. A ruling of accident or natural causes would not necessarily end the public's questions either, particularly if toxicology reveals something Elena should never have had in her system. This case also raises a question that extends beyond Elena Moore individually, and it is worth pausing on directly. If reports that she was discharged from a mental health treatment facility on or near the day she disappeared are accurate, that detail alone raises standard of care questions that any responsible facility should be able to answer. Who signed that discharge? Was a family member or support person contacted beforehand? Was there a documented safety plan? Was a follow-up appointment scheduled? Was she released into someone's care, or was she released entirely on her own? These are not accusations against any specific person or institution. They are the kind of basic procedural questions that apply to any mental health discharge, and they are almost certainly questions SLED investigators are already asking as part of building a complete picture of Elena's final days. There is also a clinical reality worth understanding plainly. The symptoms of certain toxic exposures, confusion, disorientation, paranoia, cognitive impairment, can be clinically difficult to distinguish from an acute psychiatric episode without specific laboratory testing. A facility treating someone for what appears to be a mental health crisis would not typically screen for unusual toxic compounds unless there was a specific reason to suspect poisoning. This remains entirely speculative and must be stated as such. No evidence has been released confirming Elena was poisoned or harmed by any person. But it is precisely why the toxicology results carry so much weight in this case, regardless of which direction they ultimately point. This case has not unfolded in isolation. It is taking place in a state already processing intense national scrutiny around two other cases. The Micah Miller case, another young woman whose death within a troubled marriage drew similar national attention, and which involved an FBI search of her pastor husband's home, has been referenced directly by outlets covering Elena's story. The specifics of the two cases are entirely different, but the underlying pattern of public concern is strikingly similar. A woman who told friends she was afraid. A death that generated more questions than answers. A community demanding investigators get it right the first time. South Carolina has also been navigating the ongoing Alex Murdaugh case, with a retrial hearing scheduled in Lexington County, the same county where Elena's body was found. That overlap does not suggest any connection between the cases. It simply means the people of Lexington are watching this investigation with the memory of other cases fresh in mind, and their patience for anything less than a transparent process is effectively zero. The scale of national attention on this case has been genuinely unusual for a missing person investigation in a city this size. NBC News, ABC News, Fox News Digital, USA Today, People Magazine, TMZ, and Newsweek have all covered Elena's disappearance and death. Television personality Nancy Grace has addressed the case publicly. Ashley Banfield dedicated a full episode of her podcast specifically to analyzing the doorbell footage and the unanswered questions surrounding it. News Nation has covered the case extensively across multiple programs, including segments hosted by Chris Cuomo and Jesse Weber, along with field reporting that helped obtain and verify the Ring doorbell footage that became the most discussed piece of evidence in the entire case. Wolf's Fitness Center, where Elena worked as a trainer, told Newsweek they had provided all relevant information to police and would continue assisting investigators with anything further they needed. Their statement was measured and cooperative, matching the broader posture of an entire community that wants real answers and is willing to participate fully in the process of getting them. The community response on the ground in Lexington has been extraordinary in its own right. A memorial on Old Cherokee Road began with a single bouquet of flowers left on a Wednesday night, and has grown steadily into a sprawling tribute of flowers, candles, and handwritten notes. Heather Russell, one of the first people to leave flowers at the site, told a local news station she remembered Elena from Planet Fitness as someone who was always smiling and bubbly. She said she had lost her own father 5 years earlier under circumstances that were never fully resolved, and that Elena's case hit close to home for that reason. Her husband, Dean Russell, said the discovery was especially unsettling to him because he had always considered Lexington a genuinely safe place to live. Mindy Miller, who had known Elena since she was 18 years old, spoke with reporters near the ravine where the body was recovered. Visibly emotional, she called the discovery absolutely devastating and said that things like this simply do not happen often in Lexington, adding that to know Elena was to love her. Scott Powell, who lives a quarter-mile from the recovery site, told reporters he hoped investigators would remain transparent and honest with the community so people could finally get the answers they deserved. Every resident who has spoken publicly about this case has echoed the same underlying sentiment. This kind of tragedy does not happen here. And because it did, the community is not willing to let it fade quietly. What everyone is waiting for, Elena's friends, the Lexington community, investigators, and the thousands of people across the country who have followed this case online, is the same single thing: the toxicology results. Because those results will either confirm the presence of something that should not have been in Elena Moore's body, or they will not. And whichever way they go, the entire conversation surrounding this case will shift permanently and immediately the moment they are released. Elena Catherine Moore was 39 years old, a personal trainer, a bartender, a woman who, by every single account from the people who actually knew her, showed up even on her worst days. The flowers still growing on Old Cherokee Road are not just grief. They are a promise from an entire community that will not stop asking until they finally know the truth. Given everything you have just heard, the brunch, the doorbell footage, the unaccounted gap before the public sighting, the search effort, and the pending toxicology results, do you believe the autopsy will reveal something that changes the direction of this investigation? Or do you believe Elena's final weeks will ultimately be explained by a mental health crisis with no other cause behind it? Drop your honest answer below. Tell me where you are watching from and what time it is over there right now. This case is not closed. The science has not spoken yet. And when it does, Dark Pulse will be here to break it down in full, with every detail, the moment it happens. Hit that like button. Share this with someone following Elena's story. And subscribe to Dark Pulse with the notification bell turned all the way on. For Elena, until the truth comes out, this case is not over. And neither are we.